Lyle Rapaki, and this is Arizona Today. My guest is Congressman Andy Biggs of the 5th Congressional District in Southern Arizona. But what's really exciting here, not only that, is that he's a member of the Freedom Caucus and also has announced to run for governor of Arizona. And I've been privileged to know the congressman. I was going to say senator because when I met him, he was a state senator. He was president of the Senate, Arizona Senate. But he's been in Arizona, helping Arizona really make sure that we don't fall into like a California state for a number of years. So when I learned that he announced for governor of Arizona, and given all the stuff he's doing in Washington, D.C., I said, please try to find a minute or two and come on, because I know there's a lot of people across Arizona and the nation who want to hear from you. They want to know why you're running for governor, why are you leaving the Freedom Caucus and stuff like that. So we're gonna discuss those things. So Congressman, thank you very much. I'm sure you had nothing else to do today. So, if it's all right with you, I would like to really have you introduce yourself to a lot of people in Arizona. Now, he's well known, folks. Please don't read into this. But he's going to run for governor of Arizona, and that includes all the way up in Page, Arizona, down to the border, east and west, all over this place. And I want people to get to know who Andy Biggs is. Now, I know that you were in the legislature, excuse me, from 2003, I think it was, to 2011. And then you became a senator from 2011 to 2017, 16.
Yeah.
And you were president of the Senate, and then you ran for Congress. So in a lot of ways, people do know who he is, but we've had a lot of people come into Arizona, and now he's taking on the opportunity to run for governor of this state. So I wanted to introduce him to a lot of people who may not have had the privilege of knowing him. So, Congressman, if you don't mind, could you give us a little bit of background on you here in Arizona?
Yeah, sure, Lyle. Thanks. By the way, folks, I've known Lyle for, as he says, probably 10 years or better, it'd be my guess, probably 12 years. And always been an enjoyable character and a fun guy. And so it's good to be with you, Lyle. I'm glad you're doing this and appreciate it.
Thank you. You're very gracious.
So I was born and raised in Tucson, and, spent my the adolescent years, for good or ill, down south of the Gila, down in Tucson, and then I left and lived in Japan for a couple of years in a church service mission, and then returned, met my wife, who was not. I didn't meet my wife. I met the lady who was about to become my wife, and I finished my undergrad at BYU and majoring in Asian studies, minoring in Japanese, and then came back home and got a law degree from the University of Arizona. And then right out of law school was hired to go to New Mexico. And I loved the place in New Mexico. It was great people. The people were awesome. It was a wonderful little town. But they recruited me and said, we're in the center of everything, which kind of meant in the middle of nowhere. That's another way of saying you're in the center of everything. And it was fun. We loved it, and the people were super, but we needed to come home. We felt we needed to come home. So after, a year and a half or two, we came back to Arizona, and in 1986, we moved to Gilbert. And we've been here since, I think it's October 15th, 1986. We've lived in Gilbert. And we raised our 6 children, and we now have 11 grandchildren. In the meantime, I went back and got a master's degree from ASU, and did effectively all my coursework pretty much for a PhD at ASU as well. But got involved doing, I was representing various NGOs at multilateral institutions like the United Nations, and I would go represent these NGOs as well. And that's where I learned that at the time I thought the most corrupted institution in the world was the United Nations. And then I got elected to Congress ultimately, and I was like, well, maybe the UN's not as corrupt as we thought. But anyway, we were involved at grassroots level from the time we moved to Gilbert, and then ultimately ran for the state legislature and served there, and then ran for Congress and have been serving there.
I'm giggling because I'm remembering moments from behind the curtain when you were president of the Senate, and there were different events, as you recall, Congressman, that I was allowed to advise on and help other members. And that brought me into your office and your conference room and all that. And ladies and gentlemen, the reason I'm saying this is because I got to see then the senator, and now the congressman, from behind the curtain. It's one thing when you're up on stage and you do all that, but I've seen him behind the curtain. And my impressions have been that you were really more humble than I thought, given your position. And as I got to know you, and you were a servant leader, you really believed in what was in the best interest of Arizona. And I noticed that when we discussed certain things like border security, other homeland security matters with our good friend Chester Crandall, who's no longer with us.
Right.
And yeah, I miss him tremendously. And I remember in meetings with you, you listened intently. You were not in some quick hurry, let's move along. And you asked very poignant questions as to what would make things better. And that impressed me because you were not being politically correct. And you were very candid also. And ladies and gentlemen, you just heard that a little bit. And that's what made me remember this. He's very candid, very straightforward. I'm sure he can be diplomatic because I've seen that side too, but he's very candid. So I appreciate that. Congressman, you went for Congress, excuse me, in 2016, I believe it was, you were elected. I think you then took your seat in January 2017, and you became a member of the Freedom Caucus. And now, if I have that right, would you share with us, all of us, a little bit behind the scene, what it's like being in the Freedom Caucus? We hear a lot about it, and especially nowadays with the Trump administration. But what's it like if we and several thousand of us could go right now behind the curtain with you to the next Freedom Caucus meeting? What would we see? What would we hear? What are your concerns?
Yeah, so the Freedom Caucus, just a little background, that started, I think, 2, maybe 4 years before I got to Congress. And the idea at the time was to always push for a balanced budget. That's one of the reasons that they originated, and that the leadership would always say things like, "We're going to get to the balanced budget next time. We're going to really work on that next time." There's the old, let's take a win today for the team and fight in the future. So the Freedom Caucus was formed. And so, if you were to go to a Freedom Caucus meeting today, you'd see we go every week on fly-in days, and you go in and we food, the terrible food that one of us buys. Somebody will buy pizza and I can't even eat the pizza, so they'll bring it in. So everybody's there eating, and we will discuss various pieces of legislation. And my experience in Congress, which I get pretty early on, was it is the place where you have the most thorough discussion of the constitutionality, constitutional impacts of whatever legislation we're doing, as well as the unintended consequences. And it can be rough and tumble. You've got to kind of believe in yourself as you're having this debate with people, because you get into this debate and people will push me, pull you. But in the end, we're all friends, and so we're all pulling together. So that's what you'd see. You'd see a real robust debate, which is the only place you see in Congress. I mean, let's face it, the congressional committees themselves are not really set up, Lyle, to promote what I would call effective debate. And the reason is because all the committees are huge. They're the smallest committees we have are subcommittees, and they have, like I chair a subcommittee, and I think we've got 10 R's and 6 D's. So you got even the smaller committees are 16 minutes, 16 people, but everybody only gets 5 minutes. This is what you get if you get 5 minutes to ask questions of witnesses or each other or whatever. And that's not conducive to actually getting to the understanding. So you have to do a lot of work on a lot of side work. In the Freedom Caucus, on the other hand, that's where people actually can delve into and say, well, I was reading on page 62 of this bill, line 12 through line 15, it's got a problem. And here's what I think the problem is. This is what it says. Or you can say, I talked to the bill's sponsor and they said their intention is this, but when I read it, this doesn't do it. It's a more thorough vetting that you get of the bills. And that's why. And then the other thing you've got going on, which is really helpful, is President Trump learned in his first go round that the group that he can trust the most in Congress is the Freedom Caucus. He didn't like us at first because we fought to kill a really bad bill that claimed it was going to take away the ACA. But then when we were finally able to sit down with him and point out, well, this is what would have happened, he began to realize maybe it's Paul Ryan that's not telling me the truth. Maybe it's the Freedom Caucus that would tell me. And so we developed a good relationship. And so people like I have a good relationship with him to this day and speak to him probably once a week. Definitely once a week since since he got elected, so reelected. But in any event, the same thing happened again now. So the Freedom Caucus has a tremendous amount of swag because we're fairly big, we're fairly principled, but we're leveraging it. So anything good that came out of the recent CR really was driven by the Freedom Caucus with what I call adjacents, with some people that aren't in the Freedom Caucus but kind of have the same philosophy. So the adjacents in the Freedom Caucus really drove that.
Now, I think it was last week, you and a couple of members of the Freedom Caucus met at the White House with President Trump. Right. And kind of got an update on what he is doing to save America from going over the cliff. If I've got that part right, what might you be able to share about that meeting, and what is it that he's looking for through the Freedom Caucus, you and the Freedom Caucus, to help him?
Well, so I don't want to get into the specifics of the meeting because
I understand.
Yeah, but I will say this: it was a positive meeting with regard to what he's doing, and some of the outcomes, what I would call outcomes, are you seeing already? You saw the continuing resolution come out with some very specific changes, right? Small changes, because you can't do a lot of changes in a CR. And then, by the way, this is how crazy this place is. They call these little changes now. They came up with a new word, anomalies. Folks, there's going to be some anomalies in the CR. Oh, okay. Well, what is that about? Anyway, so, but it's very candid dialogue back and forth about different issues that are pending. So, but what you see is this move for DOGE. And by the way, when you talk with President Trump, you may go in thinking you're going to talk about, let's say, an EPA regulation on maybe it's WOTUS or something like that. But you're going to cover everything under the sun. You're going to cover a CR. You're going to cover Ukraine. You're going to cover Democrats are doing face melts because of the success of what's going on with Trump. Because President Trump, we're all over the place, and so you got to be ready to answer and deal with a whole myriad of topics. And I love that. I mean, it's fun and it's lively, but some of the stuff you're seeing that's going on throughout his agencies, the departments, the cabinet heads that are actually running things right now, those are types of topics that we would cover.
You're right there. You're right there in the neighborhood in D.C. Out here, we're seeing the changes that are attempting and also are being implemented. What's the atmosphere back there? Is it really combative? Is it really stressful? It's not a giveaway question because you're right there. You're right there. And for those of us who are not right there on second base, let's say, it appears to us that every day he's under attack. I just noticed today a federal judge ruled that he has to rehire. He can't fire the people that he let go in a number of departments across the federal government because it's not proper. It's got to be contentious.
It is. It is highly contentious. It is so. There are Democrats that I get along with. I could say we're actually friends. We talk. How's the family? Blah blah blah. They're rational, but they also are really ticked off at Trump and Doge. But but there are those there, Lyle, that are doing a face melt, a total face meltdown. I don't know if there's an old Vincent Price movie called The Wax Museum. You need to see that because the faces melt. That's what's happening to Democrats. Their faces are literally melting off because they're so angry. They're so ticked off. And they have nothing. They've got nothing. Democrat analysts are saying you don't have anything. And so the fight, and so they continue to go after Trump. So the judges are activists. And there are only a few ways that you have checks on judges. One of them that I exercised when I was the state Senate president was, oh, we're going to take away half of your funding, Supreme Court. You can impact courts with funding. You can impact courts with jurisdiction. I have a bill that's floating out there. There's a similar bill from somebody else, but we're trying to impact the jurisdiction on these courts because right now the Democrats are going back to their method from the 60s and 70s where you saw wholesale change in our culture, and that was because of judicial activism. And you're seeing judicial activism rear its ugly head again. And so you can impact their jurisdiction. You can censure them, which doesn't do anything. It gives them some bad publicity, or you can impeach them. So there are some of my colleagues that are moving to impeach these judges, and then impeachment's tricky, but jurisdiction is the main check together with funding. And these guys, so the judge you're talking about that says, no, the chief executive officer does not have constitutional authority, regardless of what the Constitution says in the second Article 2, doesn't have authority to hire and fire within the executive branch. Can you think of anything more ludicrous than that? I can't think of anything more ludicrous than that. The Article 2 opens up with the president is the chief executive of the nation, runs the executive branch.
Yeah.
Well, if you can't hire and fire people in the executive branch, you're not running the executive branch. And so this is a separation of powers issue that has to be responded to. And so when we get back to your question is it contentious? It is very contentious. We have issues that will cross that'll be bipartisan. So like when we censured Al Green, 10 Democrats came over and censured Al Green.
Yeah.
A couple of them voted present because his conduct was horrible. Then you've got things like I have a FISA bill that says if the federal police apparatus is going to inspect your personal records, they have to have a warrant, right? That nothing could be more simple than that. So you have to have a warrant, and I've got fully half of the Democrats are with me and half of the Republicans, but we're fighting the war hawks, and we're fighting war hawks on both sides. So yeah, there are places that you can go and you can get together. For instance, in Arizona, we can get all of the delegation, the Mark Kellys and the Democrats to come on when we're talking about water issues, and we need to do something with water. Sometimes we have to just make sure the letter's worded a little bit differently because, right, when it was Joe Biden was in, the Democrats wanted to be really reconciliatory towards him, saying, "What a great job," blah blah blah, and we're like, "You're doing a terrible job, and we need to fix the water." And so we have to kind of make sure we have really moderated language so we keep the delegation together, but we're working together on the actual policy issue.
Let me switch. I'm going to come to your house and knock on the window until you say, "Go away, Lyle," and come back. I want you to come back because there's so much that we would like to know and about what's taking place as the Freedom Caucus in Congress. But I've got to tell you now, I've got to switch gears because you've decided to run for the governor of Arizona, and we need you in Arizona, but we need you in Congress. So maybe I can come back and knock on your window and let's talk about Congress some more. And then another night, come back and knock on the window and say, let's talk about Arizona governor some more because we need you in both places. So it's really difficult because you have so much caring for America, and I've watched you, and then for Arizona, and I've watched you there also. I've been very privileged. So, if it's all right, It's gonna be frustrating for me a little bit because you're on a really great roll, but I want to deviate here and come to Arizona. You decided to run for governor of Arizona. What led to that decision?
Well, Lyle, I do have this kind of rather unique experience, and you've seen it, and I served in the state legislature, so I know how that works, right? And as part of it as Senate President, I got and writing budgets, I came to know the executive branch, all the agencies in the executive branch as well, and worked with Governor Brewer and then Governor Ducey. So I have that experience on the looking into the executive branch as well. But I also have this kind of weird deal that's happened is where I've served in Congress and understand how the federal system works pretty extensively as well, and have a relationship with not just the president but many members of the cabinet who I consider friends. I've taken a number of them to the border to see what's going on. I've taken the wives of some of them to the border so they could see what's going on. So I have this relationship and I have this experience, and then I have this desire to do it. But I also believe, Lyle, ultimately, and I think if this nation is going to be saved, we'll have to move back from. We're in a national system now instead of a federal system. We're meant to be in a federal system. And if we're going to get to a federal system, you do need strong people in Congress helping, because President Trump, whether he knows it or not, is moving to a federalist system. So when he says he's going to get rid of Department of Education, for instance, that becomes a return to federalism. When he says,
Yeah.
yeah, when EPA says we're going to get rid of these 31 massive regulatory systems over the states, that becomes back to the states. And by the way, every state has already adopted massive clean water, clean air regulations. And so now we get to regulate those. So that's how you move back to the federalist system. And I think the states are going to save the United States of America. So that's kind of why I made the decision to come back.
In my opinion, Congressman, I'll get you off the hook, but in my opinion, and you know I'm not politically correct, it appears that Arizona has been run the last couple of years, especially by incompetence and even neglect. I do not believe Governor Hobbs has done a good job putting Arizona first, protecting our sovereignty, and trying to improve our overall state, our overall way of being. Do you see that as an issue in your seeking the governorship?
100%. I mean, that's what I looked at. I mean, you look at it and you say, well, we've got a governor who's basically said that she wants to be a sanctuary state.
Yeah.
We have a governor who's basically come out and said that she's going to, if she can, emasculate school choice in Arizona. We have a governor who said that she wants to basically get rid of right to work and move it to unionization of the state. All of those things are detrimental to us. And in the meantime, the neglect part of what you're talking about is, where's the leadership been from the administration on water? We have got water policy that they have enacted that allows all the commercial, factory, and apartments you want to build in Buckeye, but if you want to build a single family home, which is the American dream that people want to live in, you can't build one. You cannot build one in Buckeye or Queen Creek right now because of the water policy of this administration. So you've got to make sure you have a predictable tax base, tax structure. You got to deregulate where you can. And by the way, this is why you got to doge up Arizona as well. We have to have a doge experience here in this state as well. And when you do all of these things, we'll be freer, more prosperous, happier, healthier. We'll have infrastructure. We can get our infrastructure up. And by the way, the thing that will really make it is we're going to have good education. We're going to get rid of the DEI. We're going to get rid of the indoctrination, and we're going to have education so where these young people can come out and get the type of job that they desire. TSMC is coming in. They need software engineers and programmers, et cetera, like crazy. Intel does. Places like Exxon. There's places all over the state that are crying out for these types of employees, and those are high paying jobs, and it's going to be beneficial. But you you can't. I mean, you guys, people in the mountains, in the rurals in Arizona, you got solar wind farms going in, which is a mistake in my humble opinion. That's a
Yeah.
mistake. You
Um,
got insurance issues that are going on in the rural areas. You gotta. Arizona should not have to absorb the risk of bad management practices of water and land in California. We shouldn't have to, but we are having to. And that means that we have to have better land and better water management than we have right now.
I'm going to give you a minute to think about my question here before I like you to answer it, because I really like you to ponder what I'm about to say. Not that you really need to, you're very intelligent, but I'm going to give you a minute once I ask this question, and then I'll come back. What would your first 100 days look like as governor of Arizona? Uh, what do you see as maybe the top three, okay, five issues that you would need to tackle as governor on those first 100 days? I'll give you a minute. Ladies and gentlemen, Congressman Andy Biggs has been my guest, and I'm very humbled that he took the time. He's in Washington, he's back in Arizona, back in Washington overnight, all that sort of stuff. He's on the Freedom Caucus, he's a leader in the Freedom Caucus, and he's in much demand. And I'm just so grateful that he took some time out with us. I've been very privileged to know him 10, 11 years and see him behind the scenes. I say that, ladies and gentlemen, because it's, again, I'm repeating myself. You see a lot of people up on stage, you see them out publicly, these elected officials. What are they really like behind the scenes? And I've been fortunate over the years to get glimpses. How about that one? I'll do that. Get glimpses. There's been meetings and there's been other consultations. And I've watched him humbly put Arizona first, not his career first. I don't live in his district. I can't vote for him. It's none of that stuff. I think there's been a time or two, Andy, correct me, where we disagreed on certain things. And yet, when he disagreed as president of the Senate, it was always considering what's in the best interest of his members and Arizona. He's always done that from my perspective. And so to see a servant leader like that is really humbling and a great privilege. So I want to thank him for taking some time out with us this morning. All right, here you go, Congressman. You are now governor of Arizona. What's your first 100 days look like?
Well, so the first 100 days will start before I ever get sworn into office. Let's just face it. First of all, on day one, we're going to have a Doge team put together so they can go in and start
Oh, wow.
looking at corruption, waste, and fraud in the state.
Wow. Okay.
Second thing is on day one, we are going to re-implement a border security task force. Now, I know the sheriffs along the border, they have a problem because it was not really done right. So we're going to do that on day one. We're going to work with the sheriffs. I know a lot of these sheriffs around. They're good guys. We're going to work with them and DPS, and we're going to be putting that together. And we're not going to be a sanctuary state. We're going to make sure that everybody's getting 287G status. We want that right off the bat to make sure that we're doing that. I will, and this is why you need somebody who knows a little bit how the legislature works, which I do. I'm gonna get my guys and gals to pre-file some legislation, because you can't pre-file, by the way, in Congress, but you can pre-file in the state. And we're gonna make sure, like for instance, that election integrity bill that Katie Hobbs vetoed. We can't do it on day one because you have to roll it through your committees and get it through Cow and do your third reads and get all those together. But we can make sure that by the end of the first week, that bill is up on my desk, and we're signing an election integrity bill. Next thing that we're going to do is we're going to be looking at very carefully how the Department of Education at the federal level, as they disband and what they do. I'm not sure what they're doing with the money. Is it going back just into the Treasury to counter this massive structural deficit that Washington has, or is some of it going to come to locals on grants? We're going to make sure that we understand that fully and we can deal with that because we want to make sure our education is correct. Then the next thing we're going to do is, since we're going to be dealing, I'm going to have a good water team. I've got some good people in mind for water, and here's the deal. Right now, the northern basin states of the Colorado River are intransigent, and they won't move based on the Biden administration gave them no inspiration to move. And oddly enough, California is willing to take a reduction. Arizona's in, Nevada's in, but we can't get the northern states to do it. So we're headed to litigation. Litigation is not good for anybody because that's going to take years and years before that gets resolved. So we're going to have a team in place that we're going to be working there. And I do know Jared Polis, the governor of Colorado. Oddly enough, he and I were both like top scorers in some libertarian measure in Congress for a few years before he became governor of Colorado. I don't know if he'll still be governor then, but this is what we do. We're going to be ready to work with these states to make sure that our water system is made better. And part of this goes right now. I'm lobbying President Trump to leverage where he can to make sure that California increases its storage. In other words, we will have some plans. We're going to have the right people in place. So, and Donald Trump has shown the way here, right? I mean, the guy's come in and there was a small ember of fire and he's thrown massive amounts of gas and C4 on the fire. So things are really moving along. And that's what we're going to do.
That's so exciting. Thank you. Congressman Andy Biggs from Arizona has been my special guest, and he's announced to run for governor of Arizona. And I'm just very pleased that he took the time. It's very humbling that he took the time from D.C. to talk with Arizonans, but also nationally, because our show goes out nationally, what is taking place in Washington from behind the scenes. He's been there. And then also what his plans are for Arizona, which is a very key state in the Trump overall, in my opinion, Congressman, in the Trump overall plan to make America more federal. You're exactly right, to return the sovereignty to the states.
Right.
So thank you very much, Congress. I appreciate it. And I really pray that I can get a hold of you again and come back and talk about Arizona as you are seeking the governorship. I think this is really critical because Arizona's in trouble, in my opinion. So thank you.
We'll do it again, Lyle. We'll do it again.
Thank you so much. On behalf of my guest, Congressman Andy Biggs, I'm Lyle Rapaki, and that's how I see things from Arizona today.